Hello again. So in this video lesson, then we consider persistence of external economies of scale over time. So previously we have considered the underlying mechanisms of how external economies of scale emerge through economies of density and economies of agglomeration. So and these mechanisms make it that once this kind of industry clusters get established, then it can be very difficult to change, even if these initial conditions that gave rise to this kind of clusters change over time. So here is a couple of examples of what Krugman and et al. Textbook refers to as accidents of history. So, for example, the financial cluster in London emerged while Great Britain was the world's leading economy and the center of the worldwide empire. And of course, London still remains an important financial center, even though the British Empire is no longer existing, and even Britain left the European Union. And modern Britain is only a middle-sized economic power, but still this kind of industry cluster remains due to this kind of external economies of scale. Same story very much applies to New York, which was initially became America's financial center, largely thanks to the Erie Canal that led connected New York from the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Lakes of the Midwest. And of course, nowadays the importance of the canal is no longer what it used to be, but New York still remains the Americas and the world's leading financial center. Another interesting story relates to the movie industry. So one reason why Hollywood became the center of the early film industry was that when movies were shot outdoors and the weather conditions needed to be good to have the appropriate lighting. Hollywood, of course, still remains the center of movie industry and more broadly entertainment industry today, even though nowadays, of course, many films are shot indoors or even abroad or in other locations. So these examples illustrate that these industry clusters, once they have been established, they can be very persistent, even though the conditions or even this kind of initial advantages that gave rise to these industry clusters can have already disappeared. And this kind of persistence of external economies can have also some kind of disadvantages in some sense, or it can make that the world trade is sort of locked into certain equilibrium that can be difficult to then change. And this diagram illustrates the situation. So let's consider the bottom industry. And on the previous lesson, I indicated that there is a certain industry cluster in China, which is the leading center of buttons. And in this diagram, we have a quantity of buttons on the horizontal axis and price or the production cost, monetary values on the vertical axis. And suppose that we have currently the equilibrium in point 1. So China is so there is the average cost curve of Chinese button cluster. It's with the orange color, and the blue color is the downward sloping world demand curve for buttons. And so we are in this equilibrium 1 with the quantity of buttons Q1 and price of buttons P1. Okay, and the demand curve is downward sloping like usually in this kind of demand supply curves, and the average cost curve is downward sloping in China because of these economies of scale, and particularly here external economies of scale. Now suppose that there is also potentially another country, more recently industrialized Vietnam. So potentially Vietnam has even lower average cost curve than China. So if this was only internal economies of scale, so if it was just a single firm that could produce buttons more cheaply in Vietnam, so this firm could just relocate its production from China to Vietnam and produce even cheaper. So potentially there could be this new equilibrium in point two where the prices would be lower and supply of buttons would be higher. However, we are locked in because of these average cost curves are downward sloping due to external economies of scale. So we are locked into this kind of situation that currently, with starting from the scratch, then Vietnam cost is here in C0, which is higher than the current world market price of buttons. So the question is, how could then Vietnam get from this point C0 to get its button production started and get to this new equilibrium where Vietnam would overtake this position of China's button cluster. The problem here is that when we have external economies of scale, then it's not just that the single button making firm would relocate to Vietnam, but this entire cluster of firms would need to follow, and this is much more difficult than to relocate if the conditions change. Okay, so this can then lead to this kind of somewhat suboptimal situation in the longer term. So this can be then argument for some protective measures, and here is the similar kind of example from the Krugman et al. Textbook. Now we switch just for countries and the product. So similar to before, in this example we have considered watches, and we have quantity of watches on the horizontal axis and price and cost on the vertical axis. And suppose that the Switzerland is the leading watch manufacturer in the world, and we have this kind of Swiss watch cluster has again, thanks to external economies of scale, this kind of downward sloping average cost curve, and the world demand curve is this blue line. So the world market is in this equilibrium one, like in the previous example. Now, suppose that Thailand is trying to, as a new entrant, become a new entrant to the world's watch market. And in this example, we have drawn this average cost curve such that initially Thailand's cost per watch is just slightly above this world market price, where the world production is dominated by the Swiss manufacturers. So this kind of situation then could give rise to that Thai watch industry could lobby the policymakers in Thailand to establish some kind of protective measures. For example, establish very high tariffs for the Swiss watches. So if this kind of protective tariffs would then help the Thai manufacturers to start operating, then it could be that in Thailand, Thai watch market, the new equilibrium would be in point two, where there is this demand curve for Thailand, and Thai manufacturers could supply the Thai market with a much lower cost. So there is this price level 2 then emerging. So this is the basic infant industry argument for tariff protection, that initially some kind of protective tariff could help to this kind of competing country to establish its own industry and to become then a relevant competitor for the existing industry cluster in the world. So notice that in this example, of course, initially this tariff protection would only then protect the Thai market. But of course, then once this Thai manufacturers get in the business and manage to get the average costs down by increasing their scale and learning by doing, and particularly they need to establish this kind of a strong enough industry cluster to benefit from the external economies of scale. So of course, and then eventually over time, Thai producers could also start competing with the Swiss producers, and perhaps also then later on in the longer term, these protective tariffs are no longer needed because then the Thai manufacturers would be strong enough to compete on their own. So this is this kind of basic infant industry argument that could be useful for tariff protection. So we will of course discuss more about tariffs and the deadweight loss of tariffs later on in these video lessons. But before that, in the next theme of we will consider international firms, and we start from exporting firms. See you then.